Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular evening council meeting of Monday, November the 8th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. You can now attend council chambers in person, and we do have people here tonight. It's a refreshing change. Individuals who wish to attend the council chambers in person may do so by registering in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there's enough space in council chambers. You can watch the meeting live or recorded at the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com, District of Summerland. If you have not requested to speak during the meeting, if you have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, you may be given the opportunity to do so, time permitting. After I have provided everybody who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. The conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Corporate officer, do we have no late items to introduce? So could I ask someone to bring forward the agenda, please? Councillor Traynor, seconded by Councillor Van Elfen. All in favor? Thank you. And then adoption of the minutes of the October 12th regular evening council meeting. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Barkwill, thank you. All in favor? Okay. Moving on to the mayor's report. Council did not have an evening meeting on October the 25th, so my report will cover activities for the last 4 weeks. My thanks again to Councillor Patton for chairing the October 25th afternoon council meeting and accepting the first poppy in his capacity as acting mayor in honor of Remembrance Day this Thursday. On October 13th, I attended the reporting out portion of the Memorial Park design charrette led by district staff. I heard several thoughtful and innovative ideas about adapting the park to make it more accessible, tie it in with other cultural spaces in the downtown core, and provide increased use for a variety of outdoor activities. Later that day, and 3 more times the following week, I participated in Climate Solutions Council meetings in advance of the province's October 25th release of the Clean BC Roadmap to 2030. The roadmap introduces new ideas to help BC achieve the Paris emissions reduction targets for 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. CAO Stat and I participated in a meeting with Municipal Affairs Minister Osborne and Lori Ann Rutenberg on October the 14th. Ms. Rutenberg is the newly elected chair of the Union of BC Municipalities. The topic of discussion was on how the province might be able to assist local government in COVID-19 recovery. I spoke about how Summerland's tourism economy has struggled and how a strong recovery could be a joint priority of the province and local governments. Several other mayors on the call echoed this concern, and we are hopeful to have continued discussions with the province. On October 16th, I attended an on-site reception hosted by the Hunters Hill team as they began selling lots for phase 2 of the development. It was a good opportunity to talk to local builders, potential property owners, and the project managers as we toured the second phase. As council liaison to the Summerland Community Arts Council Board, I attended their monthly meeting on October the 19th. The board is very pleased with their new space at the George Riga Arts and Culture Centre. The fundraising committee has been working very hard to make up for revenue losses due to COVID. The first annual comedy night for the arts is on November the 26th, featuring Summerland's own David Kopp, and the Light Up the Arts annual Arts and Crafts show begins November 12th, that's this Friday, and runs through to December the 24th. Whether you're looking for special gifts and stocking stuffers created by South Okanagan artists or not, a visit to the center to see the outstanding creations of the decorating committee is worth your while. On October 20th, I attended the Development Process Improvement Advisory Committee meeting, and in the evening, the virtual short-term rentals presentation. Thanks to district staff for a detailed presentation, and to the many community residents who shared their thoughts, concerns, and ideas either during the discussion or through the online survey. A draft of the amended bylaws will come before Council next month for discussion. On October the 21st, the CAO and I attended the virtual Mayor's Vaccine Roundtable with IH, and that evening I emceed the reopening of the George Riga Arts and Culture Centre, hosted jointly by the District and the Summerland Community Arts Council. Members of the Riga family traveled for the celebration and told some great stories about their dad and his contributions to Summerland and beyond. The CAO will provide more updates on the renovations in his report. I was out of town from October 23rd to 30th, but attended 2 virtual council meetings, one of which was the start to the 2022 budget process. On Saturday, I joined several volunteers to plant Indigenous plants at the Kamchanikwa Floodplain Re-Engagement Project, situated on donated Lokati land on the south side of the Penticton River Channel. The project has created an off-channel rearing backwater area for native fish, particularly Chinook and rainbow trout, that offers refuge in high water and food sources during 3 seasons, as well as a wetland for amphibians and waterfowl. This year, in its 3rd phase, plants propagated at the Anelkin Center's educational greenhouse and nursery facility are being planted to restore habitat for at-risk species at the Kamchanikwa project site. The final planting day for 2021 is next Saturday, November the 13th. And lastly, just this morning, CAO Stat and I joined Regional Mayors, Forest Lands Natural Resource Operations Minister Katrine Conroy and ministry staff on a discussion about the old growth forest 2-year deferrals announcement. It was a very interesting conversation with plenty of answers to good questions for participants. Generally, the province will be working with Indigenous leaders throughout BC, then reaching out to local government, the forestry sector, environmental professionals, and other key stakeholders for input before formalizing a plan. And that's my report tonight. Over to you, CAO Stat.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a while since my last CAO report, as there was no evening meeting on October 25th. So I wanted to start with reflecting back on October 21st and the announcement of the building renovations and naming of the new George Riga Arts and Cultural Centre. I'm proud of the work staff did in overseeing the renovation and working with Summerland Community Arts Council, which resulted in the full-scale interior renovation, including electrical, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, lighting, flooring, new partition walls and a floor plan, as well as fire and life safety improvements. While the Summerland Community Arts Council and Art Gallery will reside on the main floor of the renovated building, the 2nd floor is shared space, which will offer arts and cultural programs and events, recreation programs, and rental space administered through the Arts Council. With the renovation, the renewed building is set to serve the community for many more years to come. In fact, the next item I wanted to update Council on is the district will be holding a builder's breakfast on November 19th, which will be held at the George Riga Arts and Cultural Centre. The session will be from 6:30 a.m. till 8:30 a.m. Breakfast will be provided, and we are inviting builders to come out and have their morning coffee with us and learn about the RDO and learn about the RDOS and District of Summerland STEP Code implementation. Local energy advisors will be present to answer questions, and best-in-class builders who can provide information on how to keep a building airtight. Because we have limitations in the number of people that can attend, interested builders should call our Director of Development Services, Mr. Brad Dolovid, at 250-404-4057 or email him at dollevoet@summerland.ca. On November 2nd, staff released an expression of interest for the Okanagan Food and Innovation Hub for a land and/or building partner. Proposals are due November 25th, and we are looking forward to exploring the possibilities with this exciting project for the region, which has also been identified as a council priority. Finally, for council's awareness, we are conducting an eco-village design charrette on November 29th and 30th. We're still in the very early stages at the strategic level for this exciting concept, but this session will involve key stakeholders in a comprehensive discussion to explore the opportunities from a planning perspective. In parallel track, we have conducted high-level environmental analysis of the site, and the Penticton Indian Band is presently involved to conduct review of the site from a cultural and archaeological perspective. All these steps are important to ensure the project and location is sound, and to set the table for further council decisions on how and when to move the project forward in terms of development. And with that, I conclude my report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Graham. Any questions, council, on the mayor's, or sorry, the CAO's report or my report? Okay. Now we have the first of two public comment opportunities. Is there anyone that has registered to speak?
We have no registered members of the public to speak. However, we do have one member of the public in person, and I do see a phone number online that may or may not want the chance.
Okay, so Marianne, could you come to the podium, please, and state your name and address for the record? There should be the button on the right. Perfect, thank you.
Marianne McDonald, 6505 McDonald Place. It's concerning number 12, which is notice of motion for the mayor to be one of the delegates to the RDOS. And from my point of view, I think that's a poor idea, simply because I think that future councillors, there may be somebody that is a little more suited to the job or has more interest. And I also feel that it would be a denial of the democratic process. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Is there anyone on the line that is looking to speak at this time?
Yes, I am.
James, I think you're going to be speaking at the second opportunity, correct?
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask again, is there anybody that is showing that they joined us via Zoom that wishes to speak at this time? All right. Okay, so we will get into the first of two development reports. 9.1 development permit for 3240 Landry Crescent, DP 21-010.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the district received an application for a multiple family development permit for 3240 Landry Crescent in Trout Creek. So this application reviews the form and character of a 45-unit cluster housing development. And this development permit application also includes two variance requests to accommodate the site plan proposed. A variance to allow for parking in the required yard abutting a street, and to reduce the rear parcel line setback along Landry Crescent from 7.5 meters to 6 meters. The property is designated as medium density residential in the OCP and is zoned residential medium density RMD in the zoning bylaw. So the RMD zone allows for apartment, townhouse, or duplex housing, as well as cluster housing. So cluster housing can be a mix of single detached duplex, housing townhouses or a combination of any of the above housing unit types, as long as there's at least 3 of units on a single property. So this proposal is for cluster housing with 45 units with a mix of single detached housing and duplexes. There's 19 duplex buildings totaling 38 units and 7 single detached dwellings in the proposal. So this site immediately abuts Okanagan Lake, and there is a pedestrian connection from Landry Crescent off of the property on the western property line, as well as a footpath on the eastern property line near the park that connects to the waterfront trail. Currently, there is a temporary sales center for the development, which was recently approved by council through a temporary use permit. And the site also contains a protected riparian area, and there's currently temporary fencing along the protection area boundary. A separate development permit for the watercourse development permit area was previously issued. So this development permit is for the form and character of the cluster housing development. So one of the duplex unit types is shown on the character sketch here, depicting this streetscape along Landry Crescent with pedestrian connections to the interior of the site, as well as private driveways, decorative fencing, and landscaping. One part of the application that's shown here that isn't as articulated on the building elevations is the use of curved decorative fencing to provide additional visual interest along the street and to de-emphasize the prominence of the garages. The proposal is for 7 single detached dwellings and 38 duplex housing units. And this character sketch depicts the interior view of the property where the units surround common amenity space and the shared pedestrian pathways that link the housing within the site. The proposal includes 27 buildings in total, so 1 amenity building and 26 residential buildings. So the site is accessed by individual driveways from the units abutting Landry Crescent. And then there are 4 6-meter wide common driveways accessing the other units' driveways or the common parking areas. The parking areas contain parking for the single detached dwelling units that do not have vehicle access. And those units are shown in blue on the site plan. And the parking areas also contain visitor parking. The development portion of the site is fully landscaped around the buildings, parking areas, driveways, and amenity areas. There's also the streamside protection and enhancement area protected under covenant, as well as protected under the conditions of the watercourse development permit. And this area is shown in white on the site plan. So of note, there are pedestrian connections to the public trail within the protection area, and these connections are supported by the QEP overseeing the work. And split rail fencing will be provided along the boundary of the development area and between the protected area and the development area, as well as around the trails. There will also be a privacy fence along the western property line, and the eastern parcel line has a 7-meter separation between the proposed buildings and the park parcel line to the east. And the access trail is to remain along that eastern boundary. I will also note that the applicant intends to apply for a shared dock for the strata, but this dock is not part of this development permit application. So the water in front of this property is split zoned WZ1 and WZ2, and the dock shown on the plans does not meet the current zoning requirements. This proposal also includes a request to reduce the rear yard from 7.5 meters to 6 meters. Because the property abuts the lake, the property line along Landry Crescent is considered the rear yard, which requires a larger setback than the front yard. In other zones, there is an automatic relaxation to the rear yard setback for lake fronting parcels that's written into the zoning bylaw, but this relaxation was not written into the RMD zone. So 6 meters is the typical setback along Landry Crescent as either a front yard or as a rear yard for a lake abutting parcel. It was not the intent to require additional setback for these parcels when the zoning bylaw changed last year for lake abutting parcels, and staff is in support of this variance as it's consistent with what's permitted in the area, what was intended under the zoning updates that changed Landry Crescent from a front parcel line to a rear parcel line, and also draws buildings away from the riparian area and closer to the road. The second variance under this permit is for parking in a required yard. So the RMD zone also restricts parking in any required yard abutting a street. So the parking plan provides 2 tandem stalls for the duplexes that front the road, one inside the garage and one immediately in front of the garage in the private driveway. The parking spaces that are located in the required yard are shown in orange. And there's also 4 stalls accessed by common driveway that are encroaching into the setback area. So this development permit would allow for parking within those orange areas. The zoning bylaw regulations for parking within a required yard are varied throughout the residential zones. The RMD zone is the most restrictive as it limits all parking within a required setback. In other zones, like the residential pocket neighborhood zone or the residential strata housing zone, parking regulations are more specific by limiting communal parking within the required yard. And in the residential high density zone, where one would expect more restrictive parking requirements, parking limitations are specified for no commercial parking in a required yard, but do not limit private residential parking. And the other urban residential zones that allow for single detached dwellings and duplexes don't restrict parking in the required yard at all, so that a single detached dwelling or duplex can provide parking within their front driveways if they choose to do so. So relaxing this requirement would result in a similar use of driveways to what's allowed in similar single family or duplex zones where parking is in a driveway is allowed. So in terms of building design, the proposal includes 4 unit types and 3 color schemes. So there are 3 duplex unit types and 1 single family dwelling design. So all 3 duplex types face Landry Crescent, and the single family dwellings are located and accessed from the interior of the property and do not immediately abut Landry Crescent. I've circled each of the building types in brown, orange, purple, and blue to show the locations of the designs within the site. And the site plan also identifies the color schemes for the buildings, as they are varied between the buildings and are identified as either S, G, or W for either a sage green, gray, or white color scheme. So using several building designs and alternating color schemes adds variety to the overall development. There are 5 buildings with building type A, which is shown here, and they're all clustered on the western side of the parcel. So all of the buildings have been architecturally designed and provide varying roof lines and building wall variations as per the design guidelines. So this duplex design includes Juliet balconies to de-emphasize the garage and staggers the building wall between the units. This allows for a jog in the building face as well as slight variation in the roof eaves for visual interest. There are 9 buildings with the building type B design shown here. So these buildings also feature covered side entrance and are connected via individual pedestrian entry paths that connect to the sidewalk or to the common driveway areas in the case of the 2 units that don't immediately face Landry Crescent. So like the unit type A, they also have Juliet balconies above the garages and varied roof lines and building wall staggering. There are 7 buildings with building type C shown here. And this is the single detached dwelling type. So there are no garages within this design, and the front entrance is connected via pedestrian pathway to the common driveway areas where the unit's designated parking is located. The roof line is also varied and includes a variety of colors and materials throughout the design. And there are 5 buildings with the building type D design shown here, which features front entrances and individual garages. And this design, only one building of this type fronts Landry Crescent. The design is varied slightly between locations where building walls are staggered for some of the units and flush for others. Overall, there is variety in the materials throughout the design to provide visual interest, including in the side elevations. So the Advisory Planning Commission reviewed this development proposal at its September 17th meeting, and the APC commented favorably on the design quality and recommended that council approve the development permit, including the variances contained within. Both the Penticton Indian Band and the Archaeology Branch have advised that this property is of archaeological and cultural significance, with protected archaeological sites on the property. A provincial heritage permit is required for any land altering activities, and a building permit will not be issued for this development until a provincial heritage permit is issued for the site alteration. The Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and Rural Development also advised of requirements for all the work that must be above present natural boundary of the lake, and that further approvals would be required for the strata moorage that was shown on the plans. This parcel was also previously excluded from the ALR along with other properties to the east. And given proximity to ALR lands on the opposite side of Landry Crescent and the western parcel line, the Ministry of Agriculture commented and recommended a vegetative buffer that's protected under covenant. Internal comments included that the property is outside of the 10-minute fire response area, so sprinklers or spatial separation is required. The applicant has indicated that each room will be sprinklered, and for this reason, the fire department is supportive of the fire truck access plan that was provided. And waste collection will be curbside collection carts along Landry Crescent. It is also noted that there's high water table in the area, and slab and grade construction is recommended, and that water main looping is required. As this development permit includes variances to the zoning bylaw, the public was given the opportunity to provide written comments on the reduction of the rear yard setback and allowing parking in the setback area. So written correspondence included 5 letters noting concern for the natural riparian environment and the impact of this development on the riparian area, including potential destruction of the shoreline. There was also concerns about the development of short-term rental use and the building of a resort instead of a residential development. There was also concern with putting more residential development in the Okanagan Lake floodplain, and additional concerns were raised about the amount of parking being provided and the spillover of parking onto Landry Crescent. Just to clarify, the proposed variance for the rear parcel line setback places the buildings closer to Landry Crescent and further from the riparian area. And the impact of development on the riparian area is an important consideration, and the QEP has provided an assessment report as part of the watercourse development permit to ensure protection of the riparian area and to oversee the works on site. To clarify the parking requirements, the variances are not about the quantity of parking, but the location of parking being in the setback area. So the site design provides ample amenity space on site for residents. It also features a high level of pedestrian connectivity throughout the site, to the sidewalk as well as to the public waterfront trail. And the proposed design aligns with the watercourse development permit that protects the riparian area, and the privacy of neighboring properties is maintained through privacy fencing and setbacks. This proposal features a variety of building types, each containing their own unique and varying roof lines and building wall staggering. Covered patios and entryways also help define entrances for the units that have entrances on the side. And the use of color panels and a variety of materials add to the variety of the design, as well as having 3 color palettes, so no building is next to a building with the same color scheme. The Juliet balconies and the staggering of the building walls help to de-emphasize the front-facing garages along Landry Crescent. The proposed development exceeds the parking requirements with a total of 102 parking stalls. So each dwelling has 2 designated parking stalls for a total of 90, with an additional 12 visitor parking stalls. There is landscaping provided around each of those parking areas. And it's noted here that the parking provided does contain tandem parking, which is allowed for single detached and duplex dwellings. So in terms of landscaping, there is ample landscaping provided throughout the development area, and native species are incorporated into the landscape plan. There's also street trees, lawn areas, shrubs, and ground cover, as well as decorative rock throughout the entire development. And there's also a signage plan for wayfinding, protection of the riparian area, and sculptural signage for the shared driveway entrances. And landscaping is provided around the signage along Landry Crescent in accordance with those guidelines. So it is staff's view that the form and character of this cluster housing development meets the intent of the development permit guidelines. And the request for variances are also seen as keeping with the zoning permissions for the same housing types as what is proposed and would be allowed for other development to occur within the area. It is therefore recommended that the multiple family development permit be approved with the variances requested upon the condition of landscape security being provided prior to issuance of a building permit. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for your presentation, Joanne. Council, you're aware that we received another piece of correspondence just this morning. Okay. Questions of staff? Any questions? Well, I have a few, so I'll start us off. Pardon me?
I'm just wondering when the folks get to speak. The others get to speak now or after we ask?
No, this is a development permit with variances, and it's for approval. So at this point, no, this is just a conversation between council and staff. But thanks for asking, Councillor Carlson. I'll ask again, are there any questions? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Holmes, and then I'll follow you.
So we heard some concern about this being a floodplain, and it might not be designated a floodplain by the province, but it's anybody who's lived here long enough knows that it floods there. And so, I mean, 2 parts to the question, I guess. One is not directly related to this development, but you know, wondering why there are no parts in Summerland that are designated floodplain on the provincial floodplain map. You know, are all around Peachland is, and everywhere from Culleton down to the border is. So I think a lot of people are a bit confused of why Truck Creek isn't. But that having been said, so we can't require a floodplain exemption like you would in the RDOS, But so I see the way that's trying to be addressed is the slab on grade construction is recommended. So my question would be, why is it being recommended and not required?
Through your worship, to Councillor Holmes, thanks for the question. Other jurisdictions do provide a flood construction level that's required within their zoning bylaws in order to meet the floodplain regulations within their zoning bylaw. And if those requirements aren't met, then there would be a requirement for a floodplain exemption under the LGA. So I'm not too sure the history here in the District of Summerland, but we have no floodplain regulations within our zoning bylaw. It's something I could research further if council gave direction on and report back, but that's something that we haven't had for a number of years within our zoning bylaw. With regards to this specific development and also all of the development in Trail Creek, which is pretty much all of Trail Creek is in a floodplain area. If you look at the neighborhood, and perhaps that's part of the reason why there is no regulations within our zoning bylaw, is that, yes, it is in the floodplain, but we are dealing on a case-by-case basis with regards to each development proposal that comes in. In this case, recommending slab on grade construction, and that's our recommendation for all new development within the Trail Creek community because of the high water table there as well, but also because it's built within a floodplain area. And generally, we get good acceptance of that from the development community.
Just to follow up, then why is it not a requirement? Because we do have people all over Truck Creek. People have crawl spaces, and they're constantly pumping them out. So why don't we just require it?
Through your worship, to Councillor Holmes, I think we could. I think we need to have a little more due diligence of that specific requirement at the subdivision stage. I think in years past, especially with smaller subdivisions, it hasn't been something that has been required. Some of the newer subdivisions that we have got registered, we've required it. Most recently, the newer ones that got registered in Trail Creek just recently this past year. But I think in the past there hasn't been a willingness to require it during the subdivision stage.
Councillor Barkwell.
Don't we have certain elevation minimums that the construction must be, which is separate and apart from the water table, but and along the lakeshore and stuff would deal with the flooding? I know I've seen floodplain maps because we developed some property along the waterfront to a creek 10 years ago. And I remember the whole issue of elevation. You know, the lake has certain parameters, and then all of our construction had to be above a certain elevation. So there must be something there that deals with that.
Yeah. Through your worship to Councillor Barkwell, yes, in the building permit process, we do check flood construction level to ensure it's over the standard level. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, that the Okanagan Lake, we all share the same flood construction level for the Okanagan Lake across our jurisdiction. So we do check that at the building permit stage for any lakeshore properties that are adjacent to the lake. But like I mentioned, Trail Creek is even not on lakeshore properties, is all within the floodplain. It is something that is of concern in terms of development in the Trail Creek community.
Okay, Councillor Traynor and then Councillor Patton.
This development is going to be located right next to a little park and also along the public pathway. And so I'm just wondering, I know that there's a qualified environmental person that's going to be overseeing this, but how can we ensure that especially during construction phase, that the pathway, sorry, I'll take this off, that the pathway and that little park area, which is also kind of like a little sanctuary for birds, is protected? Do we have anybody from the district, I guess, that would be monitoring that, other than, you know, the biologist or the qualified environmental, whatever they're
Professional.
called again?
Sure. Through the chair. There wouldn't be anybody on site from the district that would be monitoring that. We do rely on professionals, so the qualified environmental professional, to oversee anything within the protected area. So the waterfront trail is within the protected riparian area. And then that area is going to be fenced off during the development. And that trail in particular and the connection points from the development to that trail are also going to be permanently fenced to encourage lack of creep, essentially from the connection points to the protected area. So there is going to be some selected tree removal with the QEP monitoring that, but specifically just for danger trees that have been identified in the arborist report or in invasive species. But we do rely on the qualified environmental professional to oversee that work that is on site.
Okay, so they monitor it and then report to the district or to the developer if there's any issues? Okay, thank you. And I just have another question, or?
Before you go on, is the second question related to
No,
the?
it's not. No.
Okay, I just wanted to ask if Mr. Jantz is one of the gentlemen sitting at the back, because he is the QEP. Are you is there anything that you would like to add to answer more fully Councillor Trainor's question? Not that Joanne didn't answer it fully, but just if you wanted to add anything, just for assurances, please.
Okay, as part of my original assessment of the property, I was responsible for considering the environmental needs for the area and protecting the wildlife and fisheries resources there. And so not only through my original assessment report, where I outlined all of the monitoring and environmental safety aspects of the project that would need to be considered. We set up a monitoring program to make sure that we protected those sensitive areas. And we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to not only protect those areas from floodwaters and such, but also the impact of the additional residents that are going to be using that area. And so we've come up with a program where we're going to have all of the trails fenced with post and rail fencing to try and discourage any movements or trespass into the areas that we consider as being sensitive. And we've worked with Kirchhoff in trying to address the situation and make sure that we have a safety zone there. And in most cases, we have a 15-meter setback, which was designed to protect the treed and vegetated areas, which we also extended further in some areas up to 22 meters, where we had growth of black cottonwoods, which are considered threatened communities in the interior. So our whole focus on environmental protection here has been to try and not only protect those riparian zones and the wildlife and fisheries values that are associated with those, but also to lower the impact of having the increase in the number of people that are going to be living there. Does that answer?
Thank you, Mr. Jantz. And go ahead with your next question.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so my second question is, and I apologize if this has already been mentioned, but there'll be obviously an increase in traffic in the area, and I assume that most of the people living there will be using the exit, which is the intersection with Arkell and Thornbur and Highway 97. So did the Ministry of Transportation have any concerns, considering there is no light there and we have had accidents there in the past?
So through the chair, the Minister of Transportation did not comment on this development permit because the property was already zoned for this use. Sign off from the ministry was not required, and they wouldn't have provided comment. The only development permits that they require issuance approval of are for extremely large commercial or industrial development permits.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Traynor. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was answered, and I found it in the drawings here. It was in regards to Councillor Barkwell and the geodetic elevation of the lake. And so I was just seeing Councillor Holmes was talking of a crawl space, so I was just looking at the drawing. So I answered my own question. Thank you so much.
Well done. Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A topic we haven't talked about yet is the commercial cherry orchard that is planted across the street directly from this operation. Zoned A1, I believe. It's in the ALR. And I guess my concern is I haven't seen where the buffer is going to be. I haven't seen what the plan is to mitigate the fact that we're going to see conflict, because on approximately April 15th, that cherry orchard's going to go out every year and they're going to spray dormant oil. That oil, if there's a bit of drift, that oil is going to drift, and those cars that are parked on that road are going to have dormant oil. It's not going to hurt the cars, but it's certainly not going to be something that those who live there appreciate, or those who are visiting, or those who are renting those units. Just one example of the problem. The other might be that the best time of day to spray an orchard on the lake is at 5 o'clock in the morning, and those rows are planted north-south, which means that about 100 times over that morning, a tractor is going to make that turn around that corner. And tractors are not, especially with sprayers, are not quiet. Mowers are not quiet. And I think that unless we have a proactive plan to educate the people who are buying, who are living, and who are potentially renting or visiting those spaces, we're going to start to see a lot more conflict than district staff needs to deal with, and a lot more conflict than the Ministry of Agriculture needs to deal with. And so I would like to know if we can proactively educate, perhaps, or ensure that those who are investing in that location understand that it's not always going to be idyllic. I think that between middle of April and the end of July, there's an active, very active farming operation happening right across the road.
So the question is there a way to proactively work on that education piece, or how could the district support that?
Sure. So through the chair, that is something that could be considered as part of the development permit, because there are design guidelines essentially looking at setbacks or building design to prevent that conflict between agricultural uses and residential uses. The design, as it's shown, has the setback of 6 meters from the property line. The roadway right-of-way is approximately 16 meters in front of that to create a bit more distance between that active agricultural property and this one. There are street trees that are going to be planted along those rows as well. And in terms of the building orientation, a lot of the private outdoor space for the residents along that road are oriented towards the lake, not Landry Crescent, to again create kind of a separation of users, as well as the building orientation not being directly on the street, but slightly at angles with side entrances that also was seen as being part of a mitigating measure within the existing design. The use of fencing, higher fencing than what's being proposed in terms of the decorative fencing could be an element that could be incorporated into the development permit, or additional more restrictive vegetative buffers. Just being the other side of that requirement is the impact to the visual streetscape and kind of creating a visual barrier between the development and the street. But there are potential ways to mitigate that. The proponent has also been pretty active at incorporating signage for the protection of the riparian area. So there could potentially be additional signage for, warning against agricultural conflicts. And there could potentially be a condition where something could be registered on title if that was considered necessary for the issuance of the development permit.
Thanks, Your Worship. If I follow up to Joanne's answer too, and actually I got another question for Joanne, if I may, Your Worship. I know that in the ALC decision, there was a number of conditions originally for the exclusion of this area with regards to the buffering of the agricultural property across from Landry Crescent on the farm side, not so much on the residential side, but also I believe notice to be provided to any future potential residential purchases of the residential development. I'm just reading the external comments here. So are you aware if there's any type of thing on title that confirms that notices to be provided to future owners or not?
I am not aware of anything on title that was registered as part of those exclusion conditions.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Just to follow up, I think the comments made by the ALC are important. And the further context, at least in my mind, is that if we start to have too much conflict between a new higher density development that is right against an agricultural area, the pressure grows and the pressure grows and the pressure grows. And there is that perception that that agricultural land might then become more development land in the future because it's seen to be surrounded by development, and perhaps there's too much conflict, and so the best solution is to put more development in and remove that agricultural land. And so I think that the Land Commission sees that as a concern. I certainly see that as a concern, because if it's not done carefully and properly, then I do think that it either becomes obsolete and is just not farmed anymore, or it sits there until someone sees the value in trying to exclude it from the land reserve once again. So I do think we need to take extreme caution if we're going to continue to protect farmland down in Trout Creek. This is one of the last big parcels, and it's there's more and more controversy or confrontation between rural and perhaps people coming from big cities, and they may not understand what they're getting into, and that Summerland is an agricultural rural community. So I just caution that we may end up in a bit of a storm if we don't take this seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. I don't have anyone else on the, Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question regarding the provincial heritage permit, and I'm just wondering what the process is for the developer to obtain that, and is there any role for the district in that process, or you know, is there anything that we will need to do, and or is our only role is that we just don't issue the building permit until that's received, and could that provincial heritage permit potentially put any restrictions on the building permit?
So through the chair, there isn't a referral process to the district for that provincial permit. So our role would be to ensure that we didn't issue a building permit that would allow for land altering activities until such approvals were acquired. As part of the application process with the ministry, they have their own referral process to affected Indigenous communities, but that referral process is not consultation on the project itself, but on the methods and mitigation that are being proposed that relate specifically to the archaeological sites. And that process is underway right now.
Okay, I'm going to ask my questions now. I had a question similar to what Councillor Holmes just asked. I guess it's more of a follow-up to what Councillor Holmes asked. So we've heard a little bit about the process between the developer and the province through the Heritage Conservation Act, and that we're not typically involved in that. But I think I heard you say that the province has a duty to consult with, in this case, the Penticton Indian Band as the First Nations closest to this area. And you said that process has already started, right? What is the permit that would come back from the province? Is that like a land altering permit? The reason I ask that is in the report, the request for a decision report from staff, it states that both the province and the Penticton Indian Band, or the Silk people, have identified cultural and archaeological sensitivities in that area, which can be expected. I mean, it's right by Okanagan Lake, right? So I'm wondering what that process looks like, what kind of permit comes back, and then where we go from there. Well, I guess it's not so much where we go from there, but what happens after that. Given that there are identified sensitivities there, cultural and archaeological, I can see that there may be some pushback from the Penticton Indian Band. So I just want to understand that process so that I have a better understanding as we make the decision on whether or not to proceed tonight.
Sure. So essentially, their application process is for them to review the application and then recommend it to referral. It's a referral to several Indigenous communities with shared traditional territory within the area. So not solely the Penticton Indian Band, but there are other communities that are also included in their referral list. So that consultation is in regard to the methods and mitigation related to the archaeological sites. And so the next steps after that would be for the application to go out for referral. And then there's usually a 45-day comment period, but that has been, I believe, extended to 60 days for wildfire-affected communities. And that probably was still active at the time. And then those comments are reviewed and then addressed by the project officer. And then the project officer reviews those final comments and makes recommendations for either permit issuance or rejection. And then the statutory decision maker makes the recommendations of the reviews the recommendations of the project officer and then decides if the permit can be issued or not based on those referral comments.
So the project officer is a person at the Provincial somewhere, Flinroe, in that branch. And then the person that you refer to as the statutory officer, is that our approving officer? No, it isn't. Who is that? Like, which level of government is that at?
It would be at the provincial level. Yeah,
okay.
so it would be similar to, say, a staff member like me, then making recommendations and sending it to someone like Brad within their department.
Okay, good. That really clears it up a lot. Thank you. Before I got a couple of other questions. Is there anyone else that wants to bring forward a question? I mean, you can certainly go after me, but I'm just offering at this point. Okay. So Councillor Holmes again asked the question about recommended versus required for our high water table. So thank you for that, Councillor Holmes. On the presentation slides, it shows that a marina, dock, and dock platforms connections are not part of this development permit application. I'm wondering why there are external comments regarding that, the dock or marina or dock platforms and connections as part of the staff report if they're actually not part of the development permit application.
Sure. So the plans that were referred out and provided by the applicant showed a dock on those plans. So those agencies would have honed in on their role within that. And at the time of referral, I didn't as clearly mark out this isn't part of the development permit application.
Okay.
Part of the reason being that it is helpful to actually have those comments early on in the process. And one of, through our internal review, we also provided comments to the applicant on that marina or shared dock use so that they could take those in consideration for future plans, knowing what's involved in terms of the zoning requirements as well as provincial approval requirements to make that happen.
Good, thank you. We've heard from Councillor Carlson the real agricultural concerns, and certainly from people that live in Summerland, especially in Trout Creek. There's lots of short-term rentals, and we've heard those concerns. I think that potentially those are valid concerns. Yeah, and that's all the questions I have at this time. Councillor Carlson.
So I'll just go back to what I was saying before, and I guess it's a question now is, it says here that ALC staff are unclear as to whether this condition has been completed. And the condition that I think stands out is that the submission of a proposal, which is acceptable to the commission, to guarantee that potential residential purchasers of the proposed development are aware of the presence of the adjacent working orchard, operating procedures and operating times. So I'm wondering, if we proceed tonight and I'll issue this development permit, how can we be assured that, if that's something that council would like to see done, it does happen? Because I would like to see that done.
Yeah, through your worship to Councilor Carlson, I think that this is something quite easily we can add as a condition of the development permit so that it gets added as a requirement of the development permit before we issue, and as well as we authorize as well a building permit in the future associated with this development permit. That way, that item could be captured as part of council's approval and ensures that it gets dealt with.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Before someone, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Thought of something. One of the concerns expressed by people is that it becomes a kind of a transient short-term rental sort of place. And so hopefully those concerns will be alleviated once we bring in short-term rental regulations. But just to make it clear that they would be subject to any other regulations in the community that are put in place, that there's no sort of exceptions or anything like that.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Holmes, that's correct. Yeah, so we are currently with a separate project reviewing our licensing regime potentially for short-term rentals, and whatever is proposed as part of that regulatory regime that we are going to be bringing forward in the future date would be subject to this area as well. If it's a duplex that's permitted or single-family home, it would be permitted district-wide in accordance with this. So it'd have to follow the same licensing procedure and process to ensure that it is regulated and safe before we can issue a license for this area as well. So that helps. It wouldn't be the same as, for example, the Summerland Waterfront Resort, which actually has the zoning rights to allow for a vacation rental use already within it. Therefore, it wouldn't be under the same scrutiny.
Councillor Van Alphen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through our planner. Is this a freehold or a strata?
The intention is to have a phased strata development.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have a question before the resolution comes forward. Usually, well, I shouldn't say usually, typically, I guess, when we get a development permit, typically a development permit that comes into the district that doesn't require rezoning or OCP amendment is just handled by district staff because it's, Mr. Delavat is the approving officer, and that's the way it's legislated, is he can approve that. And then if there is a zoning amendment, an OCP amendment, then it comes to us and there's a public hearing and all of that. This particular application is for the development permit, which again, we don't really have a say in, but it includes variances, which council does have a say in. So I'm wondering if the resolution could be divided so that the first paragraph And the last paragraph about the performance security for landscape could be one resolution. And the second resolution could be for the variances. Because we really have no, we have really, it has to be approved anyways. But the variances are something that council can make some recommendations on or have some more discussion on. So I'm wondering if there's an appetite around the council table to introduce it that way rather than as one resolution. You're shaking your head. Does that mean that we're not allowed to do that? Councillor, Councillor, Mr. Delavitt.
Yeah, the way this application was submitted was as one development permit application with variances associated with it. So there wasn't two separate applications that were submitted for council's consideration. And that's the way the file was processed as well by planning staff. So I would administratively, I would recommend you wouldn't separate two resolutions for consideration, because there's only one development permit that has been prepared for council's consideration, not two separate ones, one being a variance, development variance permit, and the other one being a development permit. If that makes sense.
So then if we don't agree with the variances, then we don't vote in favor of this. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. There's only one permit currently on the table for consideration. That does include these variances.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I put the resolution on the table?
Yes, unless there's other questions of staff. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. And the multiple family development permit number DP 21-010 for the property located at 3240 Landry Crescent, legally described as Lot 5, District Lot 477, Osoyoos Division Yield District Plan KAP 82140, be adopted with the following variances. Rear setback section 10.8.6 A to vary rear setback from 7.5 meters to 6 meters proposed. Other regulation sections 10.8.7A to allow parking in the required rear yard abutting Landry Crescent, and that the receipt of the performance security for landscaping described in development permit attached to and forming part of the report from the planner 2 entitled Multiple Family Development Permit DP 21-010-3240 Landry Crescent be received prior to building permit issuance.
Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. Seconder, Councillor Patton. Okay, discussion on this? Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As far as the variances are concerned, to me, they are entirely logical. It's almost like, rather than being a variance, it's bringing it into conformity with the rest of the development down along Landry. And although there certainly is a concern, as Councillor Carlson brought up, with people not liking spray drift on their cars and such, I don't share the concern that could lead to encroachment on the agricultural land reserve. It just might mean they get unnecessary calls to our bylaw officer if people aren't educated. And the only solution here is education. I mean, there'll be occasional noise, but the noise from the highway will be about 15 times worse than any tractor spraying a few times a year. I find it really hard to understand and appreciate why people complain about this. I grew up in an orchard where the trees were as planted as close to the yard as it could be to maximize the use, and never noticed it. But maybe that's just me. If people are starting to appreciate the fact that they want to come to a beautiful place like Summerland and live in a nice rural community, then that the sound of the sprayers, which goes for 2 miles up and down a valley or across Trail Creek, is just part of life there, and it's no worse than the noise from the highway. But nevertheless, we do have to do, as Councillor Carson says, try to warn people ahead of time, whatever methods we can.
Any further discussion? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do too appreciate Councillor Carlson's concerns about the cherry orchard next door to the ALR land. It could be a different orchard or a different farming operation, but it is ALR land. And, you know, by putting up some trees along Landry, I guess will help somewhat. I think education is the ultimate goal here, to inform the new residents of, you know, what they're moving next to. I mean, I think it'd be welcomed in a lot of respects. It said also of planting trees, I believe, on the south side of Landry. Was that, sorry, question through the planning, is that, did I hear that correctly? Trees on the south side of Landry?
There's street trees on the subject property, so that would be the property side or north side of Landry, not the agricultural parcel.
Not the south side. Okay. No, like I say, I just want to say I appreciate Councillor Carlson's comments, but I think education is the biggest component here. Thank you.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will agree with my colleagues. I think that yes, it's across from a new cherry orchard, but I think that that is going to be one of the draws that brings people in. It's going to be in the farming community, and it's going to be in the rural settings in which this development will be. And I think that perhaps the education process would be done at the time of in the sales centers, where the salesmen of the units would be actually specifying that they are across from an orchard. And I think the education component, that's the only education component that we really need, is to just remind people that they are across from a working farm. But I think that Summerland needs a development like this, and I feel that being across from the farm or from the cherry orchard is more of it's not a detriment to the orchard. It's not a detriment to the site itself. I think that they go hand in hand, as in other areas within Summerland along the same size. Thank you.
Councillor Traynor.
Yeah, I just have a couple quick comments to add. I'm okay with the setbacks as well. They make sense to me. I like the design and concept of this development, and hopefully it will create a community feel for the people that move there. My main concern, which I asked before, was about just protecting the trail and the environmentally sensitive areas. And I know that that's really important for all the residents that live down in Trout Creek. That trail is heavily used. And so I am satisfied that the developer will look after that area and make sure that they can protect it as best that they can. So that makes me happy. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes, and then Councillor Van Elfen.
I guess the concern is that, you know, the place looks great. It looks like a little beach resort, and I can see why that's attractive. But the concern, I think, might be that once people live there and they experience the farm operations, they hear the noise from the highway, they might decide this isn't such a great place to live. And because it is quite attractive, and it's right on the lake and it looks like a beach resort, then it'll be a prime location for short-term rentals, and then it becomes a de facto short-term rental resort, a resort complex. And that's, I can appreciate those concerns, and but I'll put our faith in our new short-term rental regulations that'll hopefully deal with that. Thanks.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too am happy with the setbacks. I'm also happy with the idea, if I heard this correctly, split rail fencing along the trails to keep people on the trails and not in the environmentally sensitive areas wandering aimlessly. So at least the trails would keep people going in the right direction, so to speak, and off the sensitive areas. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, sort of following up to Councillor Holmes, I've read all the letters, and there seems to be quite a bit of a concern about that short-term rental issue. And I wondered, do we know what the strata rules will be for this project? And with that, are they going to have any rules against, because it seems to me that would be the ultimate, the easiest. I mean, we're going to have rules against short-term rental. We don't know exactly what they're going to look like, but they're going to, we're going to get a handle on this. But the strata would have a lot to say about it too.
Through the mayor to Councillor Barkwell. Right now, in terms of application processes before council, this multifamily development permit is being considered, I think, first by the developer, and if it's a discretionary decision of council, so if council does give approval, their next stage is to move forward with the phased strata subdivision application. So that application hasn't been submitted yet to our offices. There was a previous preliminary layout approval provided for a 12-lot subdivision, if council remembers, for this land. So that's still in place. However, we're aware that there would be a phased strata coming forward in the future. However, we don't know the details of that strata yet, so I couldn't comment on what any regulations would be.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. It's just one more question that I just thinking about. The beach and all of the area along that frontage, will it remain public access? I mean, I understand high water mark, but if someone from the general population wants to go and be there, are there going to be signs that prohibit that, or is it going to be an open place?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Carlson, yes, it will be public access. The trail connection will be maintained as a district managed trail for their guard trail that crosses through the riparian area. There are a couple of connections that are proposed to go from the development to the beach area. I think there's a total of 4, correct me if I'm wrong. 5, thank you. Which will also provide access from the development to go to the beach areas, but it would be all open to everyone accessing the beach area as well as the trail, if that makes sense.
I actually have a follow-up for that before I give my comments. So those 5 accesses from the proposed development to the beach, those would be accesses through the split rail fence?
Yes, so the split rail fence would go along dividing the riparian area, the protected
Yes.
area. Sorry, protected riparian area from the development.
Yes.
And then there would be a split rail fence along each of the pedestrian connections and then along each side of the waterfront trail. So all of the riparian areas would then be surrounded by split rail fencing to deter encroachment and trespassing.
Okay, but for the accesses that are from the proposed development down to the beach areas, are those outside of the air? I mean, they'd have to cross the walkway, right? So my question is, there will be breaks in the split rail fence to allow for those 5 accesses down to the beach?
Oh, I see.
But still
side.
avoiding the riparian area?
I believe that the plan shows a split rail fence along the trail, and then the breaks are on the development side along the walkways. So I don't believe that there's any breaks to allow for people to go through the riparian to access the beach from the waterfront trail.
Okay, I'm not making myself clear. So I understand and appreciate the work that's being done to protect the riparian areas with the split rail fence. So I hear that the breaks in the fence will be on the development side, but there won't be breaks on the fence on the other side. I'm just wondering if that beach access is open to the public, doesn't there need to be some kind of breaks in the fence there?
So at this point, they proposed no breaks in the fence on the waterfront side of the trail to keep people on the trail. Oh, there's no fence on that side. There's no fence on the following side. It's just the south side. Okay.
So it's just on the north side protecting the riparian area, but when it gets to outside of the riparian protection area, then people will have access to the beach, like public as well as, okay, good. That answers that question.
Yeah, sorry.
Good.
Sorry
No,
for
that's
the
okay.
confusion.
Thank you. Thank you. And this doesn't really play into this as well, like into our decision that we have to make tonight. But I just wanted to confirm that the public access continues along in front of Illahai Beach, even though there's a gate there that is not locked, but it still does carry along in front of Illahai Beach, correct? Or Illahai Campground or RV Park or whatever it's called now.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I'm not fully aware of. There is supposed to be public access in front of the campground. I don't know the extent of that though. I know that has been an area of concern to the district, and I believe the trail currently wraps to the south and goes around the campground like the actual trail that we manage. And to connect to the one on the highway.
Right.
So that was something that I recognize as some important connection for us in the future.
Okay. Did you want to speak any more to that? Thank you, Graham.
Sure, thank you, Madam Mayor. As a former resident of the Summerland Beach RV Park, I can confirm that there is access along the beach in front of the RV park, and there is significant traffic there by the public. There's a gate actually at the end of Garchill Trail, which is unlocked and allows people access in and through. Most people will walk around the campground because it's a pathway that leads around into the sidewalk. But there is public access. We have flagged with the developer that we have some interest in the future from a planning perspective of continuing the Gartrell Trail up to the highway area and up the, as you know, there's a bike path there. So if we could do a connection in there. So those are in the exploratory stage still. They're interested in seeing what our thoughts are, and we will carry that on further. The other thing I was going to mention, since I have the microphone now, just in terms of the buffer along the cherry orchard, there is actually a significant number of trees, shrubs, and bushes along the fenced area along the cherry orchard, and many of them are actually irrigated now. And all that's occurring there is just sort of weed whacking to keep the weeds down. But although I don't think there's a plan to plant new trees, there's a significant number of trees already forming some buffer along that piece of roadway. So just a few items there.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, I just wanted to, lend my bit to the discussion that we've had tonight. I've already spoken about the agricultural concerns and the short-term rental concerns, which I think are valid. We've heard again from Councillor Traynor about the environmental concerns, but we've heard from the QEP. I have to say, though, I do have another concern, and that is particularly about the archaeological values in that area that have both been spoken to by the Syilx people and by the province, the Heritage Conservation Act. So I do have concerns about that. And although I've heard from Mr. Dolovit about not issuing any building permit that would allow for land removal, I would feel a lot more comfortable if that process was completed to the satisfaction of the province and the Syilx Nation. So that I just wanted to express my concern there. And that's it. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Traynor and I are opposed. Sorry, Councillor Carlson and I think I've been away, like I missed one meeting and I've lost it. Thank you, so that motion carries. Thank you, Council. Okay. Long night for you, Joanne. 9.2, zoning amendment bylaw number 2021-033, unsurveyed portion of Okanagan Lake adjacent to the Summerland Racket Center.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So council directed staff to prepare zoning amendment bylaw to rezone the water from WZ3 to WZ2 for the area abutting the Lakeshore Racket Center. So as such, staff has prepared a zoning amendment bylaw for the unsurveyed portion of Okanagan Lake from intensive water to recreational water use zone 2. And this amendment bylaw would then go to a public hearing where council would hear about matters pertaining to the bylaw. So the content of the draft amendment bylaw is to change the zoning from WZ3 to WZ2. So just as a refresher, this would remove certain uses that are allowed in the WZ3 zone. And those uses that would be removed are in bold on the table. And this would include a marina use, boat launches, docks, foreshore public access, and other uses. And the only uses that would be permitted in the WZ2 zone would be boating, recreational water activities, uses permitted by provincial crown lands, and public utilities. As council is aware, council resolved to direct staff to draft this zoning amendment bylaw after defeating its previous resolution to rezone the area in front of Oasis Waterfront Development and the Lakeshore Rackets Club from WZ3 to WZ1. And the Advisory Planning Commission reviewed the original draft bylaw for the WZ1 proposal and were in favor of it proceeding so that a public hearing could be prompted. And the revised bylaw for the WZ2 zone did not go back to the APC for further comment. The Penticton Indian Band and the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development provided correspondence. PIB requested payment for referral comments and an extension, and payment was made in September for those referral comments, but we have not yet received those referral comments back to us. The Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development has no objections to the rezoning and supports efforts by local governments to manage foreshore development. So just for context of the subject WZ3 zone area in Lower Town itself, the WZ3 zone currently extends from Peach Orchard Park to the neighborhood park south of Summerland Waterfront Resort. And it abuts 5 non-district owned parcels, including the Lakeshore Rackets Center, the Oasis Development, the Trout Hatchery, the Yacht Club, and Summerland Waterfront Resort. So in reviewing the applicable OCP policies, the Lower Town area has specific policies to facilitate additional public boat docking facilities and increasing public boat access opportunities in the area. So the WZ3 zone is the only water use zone that would allow for such facilities, and no public access docking facilities or public boat access opportunities are allowed in the WZ2 zone. There's also support for foreshore leases for docks and wharfs under the OCP natural environment policies under the qualifier that the natural function and public access of foreshore is maintained. And slightly different from the previous proposal, in support of this amendment bylaw, the subject area is outside of the future development area, where there's more prescriptive policies in the OCP for encouraging new developments to provide docking and mooring facilities. And those policies don't apply because that area is not within it. And similarly, and in support of the amendment bylaw, the subject area is entirely outside of the Lower Town Development Permit area, so it abuts it to the south. But that subject area is also outside. And as such, the design guidelines that encourage additional public docking and mooring facilities also are no longer applicable. That also means that the district does not benefit from being able to evaluate environmental factors under development permit. So amending the zoning bylaw to remove such uses ensures that the natural environment remains protected in this particular area. Maintaining the WZ3 zone is being recommended by staff because it's seen as the only existing zone that aligns with the existing OCP policies for Lower Town. And the proposed zoning amendment bylaw removes those uses such as public boat docking facilities and public boat access uses. And this is not seen to align with the OCP, which is used as a guiding document so that future land use and policies provide clear direction forward. So the Lower Town OCP policies are currently supportive of providing additional facilities in Lower Town. And all bylaws that are enacted must be consistent with the official community plan in accordance with the Local Government Act. So staff is not in a position to support a zoning amendment bylaw that is seen as being inconsistent with existing OCP policies. So for that reason, it's staff's recommendation to keep the existing zoning of WZ3 and for the proposed zoning amendment bylaw to not proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Council, do you have questions of staff? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question, since staff would not support based on the OCP, wouldn't it have been prudent to bring in an OCP amendment along with the rezone?
Thank you, Councillor Patton, through the chair, to answer the question. Yes, that probably would have been our staff recommendation to also complete a official community plan amendment with this rezoning amendment, because in staff's opinion, it is not in alignment with moving forward to WZ2 is not in alignment with the policies within the OCP Lower Town section of the OCP in terms of the strategic plan. However, we're following council's direction. So that's the reason why the bylaw has been prepared the way it has been. We're following council's previous direction to prepare the zoning bylaw for consideration, and we've provided our recommendation, but council is free to move forward with this rezoning bylaw if, in their opinion, it is in conformance with the OCP.
I have a follow-up question to Councillor Patton's. Could you tell us when the Lower Town OCP policy, so within the OCP, was last reviewed?
Yeah, I don't know offhand. I apologize, Madam Mayor.
That's okay.
I believe it was probably the last time we did a thorough review of the OCP. I don't know for sure though. Whether it perhaps could have been done at an amendment shortly thereafter. And the last time we did a thorough review of the OCP, I think it was 2008, I believe, was when the official community plan was enacted.
So 2008, and we're at almost 2022. How often should we be reviewing our review? I would think, or our OCP. Seems to me it would be a shorter time frame than that.
Yeah, if I may, yeah, you're right. It should be. Generally, it should be every 10 years. It's definitely something I think we could consider at a future strategic priority setting meeting with council for a potential future project, but it's a large project.
Yeah.
You know, council should be aware.
It's a full-term project.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah, it might be something to crack with the next council, unfortunately, but usually it's about a 2-year process to review an OCP.
Yeah, I kind of think we have enough priorities on our plate right now. Okay, so thank you, Council. I just wanted to follow up on the question that Councillor Patton asked. Councillor Holmes.
I think I can shed some light on Councillor Patton's question. So when I brought the motion forward the most recently motion, I did consider including OCP text amendment, and it was, I think that staff did recommend that. I spoke with our CAO, but I was a little uncomfortable with it mainly because, and I didn't include an OCP amendment in the motion, and mainly because I couldn't really see what it was that would be amended. And it wasn't clear to me. And reading the OCP, it wasn't clear to me. There were a lot of things that I felt were an open interpretation in the OCP. When you talk about something like public access to the lake, I don't think you can just think of boats. I think you have to think of things like swimmers and paddleboards and dogs and people just sitting on a bench looking out of the lake. To me, that's all public access to the lake. And, you know, there's a lot of inconsistencies, especially when it comes to Lower Town, I find in the OCP. So the rezoning from WZ3 to WZ2, yes, it doesn't align with some aspects of the OCP, but on the other hand, it was, as we just heard, it does, in other respects, it brings it into alignment, especially for this specific property we're talking about. So the water zoning implies that the racket center land is in a development area, but it's not. So I think in some respects it brings it out of line, but other respects it brings it into line, and it's kind of a wash. And I agree totally that we should address those inconsistencies, and that's why I mentioned this afternoon if there was any opportunity to bring this portion of land into the waterfront concept plan that we're doing, and if there'd be an opportunity to address, the water zoning for that whole stretch of lake in that plan. So that was my thinking.
Councillor Barkwell.
When this issue first came up, and staff had said that the OCP encouraged marinas and such, I went through the whole OCP, and the word marina didn't occur anywhere in our OCP or the plan for downtown or Lower Town area and such in the waterfront. And I would say that the best that could be said is that what it does, wouldn't want to use the word encourage. I think it permits. And then within that, you got to decide, well, what's anywhere within that area is not the best place. It's if something might be considered, you got to look at it. It's not giving an overall blanket approval to put anything anywhere. It's would say, well, we should consider. And so within that, I'm like Councillor Holmes. I just don't see in the OCP the same interpretation maybe that staff are giving it. And in any event, it's not a deal breaker. It's the one step towards putting things right, more than causing any sort of conflict.
Okay. Are there any more questions to ask staff? Okay, so would someone like to bring this to the floor? Councillor Holmes.
I'd like to put forward the alternate motion that zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw number 2021-033 to rezone the subject water area from WZ3 to WZ2 be read a first and second time, and that a public hearing be held on December 13th, 2001 to receive public feedback on zoning bylaw amendment number 2021-033.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Seconded by Councillor Barkwell. So we've heard from Councillor Barkwell. Any further discussion on this? Okay. I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? I remain opposed for the same reason as before. I think it all should be Z2, if anything. So then that carries, and the public hearing will be December the 13th, right? Will it be here, or we haven't decided that yet? We haven't decided that yet. Okay, thank you. Okay. My scribbles all over this. Next on the agenda is 12.1, a notice of motion. So do you want to introduce this, Kendra, or do I just, yes? Oh, I just go straight into this? Okay. So you see before you the notice of motion, and I've added a little bit of background about local governments in BC with the Community Charter and the Local Government Act, and specifically the Local Government Act speaks to the appointment and term of office for municipal directors. There are 6 municipalities in the RDOS. Each of the RDOS municipalities is represented by their mayor, and in the case of City of Penticton, 3 councillors. The District of Summerland holds 2 director seats on the RDOS. One of the 2 seats has historically been held by the sitting mayor or a councillor designated by the mayor, the other a council member. Or a council, yes. The district also elects 2 alternate directors. So I would like to bring forward the resolution as written, that council establish a schedule of regional district of Okanagan-Similkameen RDOS appointments at the beginning of each 4-year term, and that one of the RDOS director appointments be the mayor or the mayor's designate, and that the council procedure bylaw be amended to include the requirement of the establishment of RDOS director appointments at the beginning of each council term. Is there anyone that would second that? Motion, Councillor Holmes. Thank you. So I'd like to just speak to this. Council's familiar with the work of former Spruce Grove Mayor George Cuff and his continuing work in consulting on leadership matters. In Cuff's Cuff's Guide for Municipal Leaders, The Case for Effective Governance, Mr. Cuff lists the key roles for the mayor, including, among other things, key spokesperson to the community, to the municipal organization, and to other levels of government, and appointment of members of council to council committees and to council liaison positions on external agencies, boards, and committees. On this second key role, Mr. Cuff has suggested that while it may be deemed a prerogative of the mayor to recommend council members, he stated that the mayor should consult with councillors prior to any recommended appointments, and that council as a whole should approve the appointments by a majority vote. So following his best practices, in late 2018, I asked each councillor, so just after this council was elected, I asked each councillor to submit their top 3 choices of committees or board appointments before making recommendations to the council as a whole. At that time, because 5 of the 6 councillors wished to be a regional district Okanagan-Similkameen director, I suggested that all councillors have an opportunity to sit as a municipal director and or an alternate director during the 4-year term, and council agreed. Now, perhaps I should have suggested an amendment to the council procedure bylaw at that time, but you know, hindsight is 2020. So tonight, I'm bringing this motion forward for consideration because, 1, amending the council procedure bylaw to include the requirement to establish a schedule of RDOS director appointments, including 2 alternates, at the beginning of the term, will ensure that an equitable system is in place for the 4-year term. If required, and following due process, the schedule can be amended during the term. So every year, as the appointments for the RDOS come before council again, that absolutely could be the time when the schedule could be adjusted. And the second reason is I think that the mayor or the mayor's designate as the spokesperson for council on matters of governance should fill one of the 2 District of Summerland RDOS director seats. And that's all I'd like to say at this time, and I welcome further comments and discussion from council. Councillor Holmes.
Just on your question, if I may, just on your last point there, I guess what's the rationale? Can you explain your rationale for why you think it should be the mayor?
I think that it should be the mayor because if we're looking at the province as a whole, it appears to be that other than maybe a few municipalities, that the mayors are represented on the board. And again, I feel that because the mayor represents the community as a whole, they still only have 1 vote on the board. But as the mayor represents the community as a whole, and as this is the way that it's been done historically, I guess, at the regional district of Okanagan-Similkameen, where Summerland is a municipal entity at the table. I think that the mayor should be in that position, whether, you know, or if the mayor chooses to have a designate, that's another council member, then that's certainly at the mayor's discretion. But I feel that it's important for the mayor to be there. And there are some situations that come up at the regional district table that really should be spoken to or acted on by the mayor and not necessarily by a councillor that is representing, that is sitting at the table as a director. So that's my rationale. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to our corporate officer. If this resolution goes forward tonight and that council procedure bylaw be amended, the next council and the next mayor could re-amend it? So Madam Mayor, I just don't understand why we're going through this tonight. The next mayor and council can make their own decision because it's not going to change anything this year.
That's absolutely true. It may not change anything this year, but I can tell you, sitting in this position, we go through this with the acting mayor's schedule every year. This would be a one-time thing at the beginning of the term that can be amended. I feel that it's important for me to bring this forward at this time, recognizing that we don't know who's going to be on council. We don't know who will be the mayor next time. And just as we have amended our council procedure bylaw a number of times already this term, it's part of the process, and it still remains a democratic part of the process. All of council has a voice. Councillor Carlson.
I recall seeing a letter recently from a different municipality and very much in the same light of what you're talking about, except they were pushing to have this put into the Local Government Act, I believe. I'm just wondering if perhaps the effort might be better spent to, see where if there's some momentum behind that provincially, and whether, if it's in legislation, then we would have to follow it, and I wonder if that might be a better place to put this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. That particular mayor was supported by the regional district in saying that they wanted to have mayors represented at the table. So she got that support from the regional district. I haven't looked for that support from the regional district, and it's kind of difficult because I'm not part of the regional district, even though I'm a mayor in a municipality that's part of the regional district. But yes, that's a good point. Maybe there would be an appetite of council to support that. I don't know. Councillor Holmes.
So as you state in your background, it's Section 198 of the Local Government Act sets out the procedures for appointing municipal directors to regional districts. And it states pretty clearly that each municipal director is to be appointed at the pleasure by the council from among its members. So there's no ambiguity there. There's no constraint on the council's decision. And if you change it, if you change our bylaw, I'd say that goes against the act. And maybe, I don't know if it's in contravention of the act, but it goes against the spirit of the act. Now, Metro Vancouver Regional District Board, I think this is what Councillor Carlson was alluding to, they did pass a resolution to request the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to amend Section 198 so that to require councils to appoint a mayor or their designate to the regional district. And so they're appealing to the government. They're not changing their own internal rules because they recognize that it's the act, that if this is going to change, then it's the act that has to be changed. It's not your internal things. And then I'd also like to note that since Metro Vancouver Regional District passed this motion, quite a few of their member municipalities have then passed their own resolutions against the regional district resolution, and they all note that the regional district never explained the rationale for proposing the amendment. We received in our agenda package of September 27th a letter from the city of Langley stating that if this change, it would affect all regional districts in British Columbia, and therefore broad consultation with all local governments in BC would be necessary. And they passed a resolution that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs consult in partnership with UBCM to solicit feedback and to provide tangible and objective rationale to support any amendment. So I really think we should let this play out at the provincial level. I'd look forward to debating it, anything that might come forward on the UBSAM convention floor. But I say, let it play out there. I don't think we need to deal with this at all.
Okay. I just wanted to speak to one thing that you said about the article or the section that's in the Act. Each municipal director is to be appointed at pleasure by the council from amongst its members. I just wanted to point out that the mayor is a member of council, and that doesn't exclude, when it says by the council from among its members, it's not excluding the member or the mayor. The mayor is included in that. I just wanted to make that point. Okay, further discussion? Councillor Barkwell.
It looked like Councillor Holmes maybe had a further comment. And I have been sitting here for 7 years now. Every year is different. I have expressed interest in sitting on the RDOS board in the past, but also have realized, geez, maybe I'm glad I wasn't, because I just don't have time. There's a few issues. There's one particular issue I am interested in that's sort of playing in the background that I would be maybe interested in pursuing at some point. But the point is, I don't think there's any benefit whatsoever by trying to burden and handicap future councils with any sort of a policy on this matter. I think it should be a decision as we go forward. It has worked for us in the past well, and it can continue to be working well, because each year is different, every council's different, and we need to make our decisions at the time based on sometimes might be the issues at hand and the people that are most vested or interested or capable with those particular issues. That's one possibility. You'd change it around, and you don't, to draw up a schedule ahead of time, you don't know what 3 years from now you go on, and then when 3 years comes up, well, no, a year earlier would have been better. It just doesn't add up for me. And that's in addition to all the very good points that Councillor Holmes has brought up.
Okay. Thank you for all of those discussion points, Council. It hasn't changed my conviction that a schedule, well, certainly would be one thing that's out of the way. Of course, annually you would review that as it came forward for a resolution that needs to go to the regional district. Last term, we didn't go through this every year, and I thought that well, I heard the expression around the table. I mean, certainly that I was the director that, or the councillor that sat as the director for all 4 years of that term, and the mayor sat for all 4 years of that term. And I heard at that time that, well, I thought this is something that we would review every year. I know that other municipalities in the regional district don't review it every year. So I thought that this might make a more equitable system, but hearing that there is not an appetite at the table, then that's the way it goes, part of the democratic process. So I will, unless there's more discussion, I will call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Okay, so that motion is defeated. Thank you, Council. Now, item 13.1, it's correspondence. Quite a few pieces of correspondence this week. I guess some of it was held over from last time that we met because there wasn't an evening meeting. Is there anything that anyone would like to bring out There were 3 RDOS reports there, and then letters from other people. Anything, Councillor Holmes?
There are a couple I'd like to bring out, if I may. I'll bring the easy one first. The letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs regarding Bill 26. I see that bill's now received 3rd reading, so it'll soon become law. And I'm interested specifically in the modernizing public notice requirements section. And I guess a question and a comment for our CAO or corporate officer. Just wondering if they see that something that we should look at, and do we see this could be an opportunity to improve our communications to the public?
Thank you, and through the mayor, Councillor Holmes, I have had initial discussions not only with the corporate officer, but also with the deputy corporate officer and the senior management team. And our analysis is that in large part, these changes are all positive. We have many different means of communication in society, and I think all those opportunities should be in the toolkit and certainly applied in the appropriate context. So we think it's good changes for a long time coming and should be well received. That's our perspective. I don't know, Kendra, if you have any additional comments on that.
Just have a question. In that piece of correspondence, it mentioned that technical details would be forthcoming to CAOs. Have you received anything further on that yet?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's interesting you asked that because I have not seen anything come through yet. And so, in fact, this morning I reached out to the ADM. Always get the last names difficult. Tara
Faganello.
Faganello, thank you. And just in terms of, did I miss something or is something still coming? And I have not heard back from the ADM yet today. So at this time, I can only say that I have not received any of the technical elements that they had promised to come out to CAOs.
Okay, thank you. You had one other. Is there anyone else that wants to bring forward a piece of correspondence? Okay, floor is yours, Councillor Holmes.
Okay, thank you. This is number C, the letter from the Chamber of Commerce regarding the Eco Village, where they ask council to reconsider what we appear to be contemplating. I'm not sure how we can appear to be contemplating something we've yet to discuss, but if I'd just like to put a question out to either our CEO or our council liaison to the chamber to ask if has the chamber asked to receive any sort of presentation or any information regarding the Eco Village, because they don't seem to understand what it's all about and specifically how we intend to proceed with the development.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes, and through the mayor. Honestly, when I received the letter, it was like a riddle inside of a mystery wrapped in enigma. I didn't understand where the confusion was coming from. We have had conversations, and in fact, both myself and the Director of Development Services have offered presentations through the President to talk about the Eco Village, but to date, those have not been acted upon. That being said, I know they are busy over there and there's been some transition, including in the leadership. So what we intend to do on that one is to get a letter back and to reoffer that to the board in writing, and also to clarify some of the points in the letter and the current positions we have. Main point being, we're still at the very early strategic planning stages, and council hasn't made detailed decisions on what the future of the land base will be, including its potential sale.
Has a member of the Chamber of Commerce been invited to the design charrette?
Thanks for the question, Your Worship. We haven't actually sent invitations out, so I think it would be good to include them as part of this process.
Yeah, that would help, in addition to the offer to do a presentation. once the AGM is over, which is coming up 21st or something. Councillor Holmes.
So just to clarify, you offered to make a presentation to the chamber, and was that before they sent this letter or after?
Yes, thank you for the question of clarity through the mayor. Yes, before the letter was received and some time ago. So both, I've certainly made that offer to the president, and also I believe I'm looking at our development services director here, Brad. You've made your own offer as well, and those haven't been acted upon to this date. But that being said, we haven't put it in writing to the board. Our liaison on this issue has been through the president as the file has moved along. Brad, did you have any?
Yeah, and my discussions with the president have been primarily just to offer the opportunity to present that on any topic to the Chamber of Commerce at any meeting if they had any questions on any of the projects that we're working on. This was some time ago, like the CEO has stated.
Okay, thank you. Any other correspondence to bring forward? All right. Could I have someone bring forward the correspondence to receive it for information, please? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Traynor, all in favor? Thank you. And the committee and commission minutes, Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for June the 23rd, 2021. Does that look okay? Yes, thank you, Councillor Traynor, for your liaison role on that. So could I have that, I guess, received for information as well? Councillor? Minutes adopted, is that right? Well, it shows adopted minutes, so I think they've already been adopted. Yeah. Okay. So Councillor Traynor, you're bringing that forward to receive for information. Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Thank you. And now on to councillor reports. Thank you for hanging in there with us, James Pepper. Councillor reports. Let's start with Councillor Barkwell.
My report is short, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything to report.
It's very short. Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. I sent out the Okanagan Basin Water Board newsletter to everybody, and I trust you received it. If you want to, I can continue sending those out to everybody if that's what you want, or you could sign up for yourself, or maybe we could add it to agenda. However, whatever works for everybody, I'm happy to do it either way. I just wanted to also mention that on September 20th, I attended the Silga Fall Speaker Series with Christina Benti about asset management. I thought it was really good. It was always good to listen to Christina talk about asset management. And I think we've been at it so long, we kind of just think we know it now. And this presentation, Christina really, I think, reframed asset management to get us to start thinking about it differently and thinking it in terms of service delivery rather than just a whole bunch of infrastructure that's out there. And she said that, in the past we failed to link services with the cost of delivering those services, and she asked the question, put the question out there: do all our assets provide a service? And if they don't provide any service, why do we have these assets? And that we should be asking ourselves, what services does the community need rather than what infrastructure does the community need? So I thought that was a pretty interesting approach, and it was a really good discussion, and I'm glad that Silga is doing these things. Thanks. I'm not sure if anybody else attended or not, but it was great. Thanks.
Well, I did. Regarding that, November the 24th is the next speaker in the series, and that's Dan George, who is speaking to us on Indigenous and local government relationships and opportunities. And just today, Minister Conroy's office advised us that she's unable to do the session that was already scheduled for her. So it's going to be rescheduled after Christmas in January. So just kind of stay tuned for more information on that one. And Minister Conroy is the Flynn Road Minister. Okay, thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Traynor.
On November 4th and 5th, I attended the RDOS meetings. On November 4th, we had a legislative workshop in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we elected a new chair and a vice chair. So the new chair, you probably already know this, but I'll just repeat it, is Mark Pendergrath, and the vice chair is Spencer Coyne. And for the hospital board, the chair is Martin Johansson, and the vice chair is Sue McCorduff. And then on the 5th, we had our first budget discussions for the year, where we talked about grant and aid. And Councillor Holm already let council know about this, but the District of Summerland request for $50,000 for the Okanagan Food and Innovation Hub project was supported. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it was contingent on the continued support from the federal and provincial governments. Is that right, Councillor Holmes? Yeah, something like that? Right. Okay. So it was nice to see their support. And then on October 25th, last month, I attended our Parks and Rec Committee meeting. It was a 3-hour meeting and it was really good. The committee gave feedback on the options that we have so far for the new rec center. They gave feedback on the downtown revite plan that we have to date, and the bylaw review process relating to parks and recreation bylaws, including the dogs and parks bylaws. So all of that information in there, their feedback on that, the Director of Parks and Rec, Lori Mullins, she'll bring that back as we discuss these items over the next couple of months. And they all gave really good feedback. We're really lucky to have the members on that committee that we do, because they bring a lot of expertise, and it was a good discussion. So you guys will all learn more about that when we discuss those specific things later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Traynor. Councillor Carlson.
I don't have anything to report tonight.
All right. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say how nice it was at the unveiling of the or the grand opening of the George Riga Arts and Cultural Center. That was a good time. It was a lot of fun. And I would also like to thank Madam Mayor and Council for allowing me to receive the first poppy of 2021. This honor was very humbling to be in the presence of Summerland veterans Doug McKay, who's the poppy chair, and Mike Brazeau, who's the Legion president, and to recognize those who have served and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And may we all show our respect on November 11th, honoring those who fought for our freedoms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. There is a kind of a simplified service like we had last year in front of the Legion on November 11th, and I've been invited to speak, and I will speak on behalf of Council, much in the words that you gave. So thank you for that, Councillor Patton. And last but not least, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too was fortunate enough to be able to attend the unveiling of our new arts and cultural, the George Riga Arts and Cultural Center. And it was really fun and interesting to hear from the family members. And it was well attended. And I think the signage on the building is really quite attractive. I was really happy to see that. I'd just like to say belated happy Diwali to all our Indo-Canadian friends and neighbors here in Summerland. They celebrated last Saturday night at the Hindu temple in Trout Creek. I think it was somewhat downsized from other years. And there's just something else I just quickly like to read here, Madam Mayor, and today is Indigenous Remembrance Day. And in World War I, the government refused the right to enlist Indigenous people unless they surrendered their right to status. Aboriginal soldiers had to not only be willing to die for king and country, but also give up their citizenship, if you will, status. No other soldiers volunteering had to make such a sacrifice. It is the right to recognize November 8th as Indigenous Veterans Day and November 11th as our National Day of Remembrance for all those who served and are serving. I just wanted to read that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And Indigenous folks were unable to lay wreaths at a cenotaph until 1995. So there you go. Thank you for bringing that forward, Councillor Van Elfen. Okay, so that's it for council reports. On to our public and media comment period. You're up, James Pepper. Again, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No problem. Why Piayat and Chai-Squeeze James Pepper. I'm the director for the Penticton Indian Band Natural Resource Department. I'm here to provide Summerland Council with a brief 2-3 minute statement from the Penticton Indian Band. The district of Summerland is located within unceded Syilx Nation territory in the Penticton Indian Band area of responsibility. The Syilx people hold title rights and decision-making authority within Syilx territory. Canada, the province, regional districts, and Summerland have all acknowledged this point of fact. Recently enacted legislation known as the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, or DRIPA, includes 46 articles covering facets of the human rights of Indigenous people. DRIPA emphasizes the Indigenous people's rights to live in dignity, to maintain and strengthen Indigenous institutions, cultures, and traditions, and to pursue self-determined development in keeping with Indigenous needs and aspirations. DRIPA is a law in British Columbia and has been for almost 2 years. The District of Summerland makes decisions that impact unceded Syilx Nation lands, freedoms, culture, health, and community. The District of Summerland makes decisions that are not in line with DRIPA legislation. The Penticton Indian Band has expressed a desire to work in collaboration with the District of Summerland and Summerland Council, and there is a process underway. However, DRIPA has been law for almost 2 years, and there's still much work to do. In many ways, the process of realizing DRIPA and the process towards truth and reconciliation are just getting started. PIB appreciates the collaboration, but there is a lot of work to do. In the meantime, impactful decisions continue to be made without meaningful engagement with the PIB community. One such example is the large development proposed at Landry Crescent, which includes, as discussed this evening, 45 lake homes, substantial landscaping, and a dock for 46 boat slips, all of which are located within an area of high cultural significance and interest. The development, in fact, is located within very important and sensitive archaeology sites and a Syilx use and gathering area. It is recognized that the Provincial Heritage Conservation Act, or HCA, plays a role towards addressing impacts to irreplaceable Syilx archaeological values. However, it is important to note that the HCA does not compel developers to acquire a permit or to protect archaeology. This is only true if archaeology is identified on site, and the vast majority of developers do not know how to identify archaeology. They do not contact PIB, and they do not engage with an archaeologist. And as a result, many hundreds of Syilx community cultural heritage sites have been destroyed within the District of Summerland boundaries alone. Local governments and their constituents regularly support the protection and preservation of heritage sites and buildings. Indeed, a small cabin built near the end of the 1800s and located near Landry Crescent was recently subject to substantial community focus and council discussion, leading to its preservation. Syilx archaeology, burial sites, and cultural heritage sites are many thousands of years old. Certainly, impacts to these sites warrant deep discussion with the Penticton Indian Band by Summerland Council and not just the archaeology branch. Summerland Council was aware of the PIB's significant concerns regarding the proposed development at Landry and chose to move forward regardless. I'm here to advise Summerland Council that PIB interests have not been adequately discussed or addressed, and to remind Council of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, DRIPA, and the mutual desire to move forward in a meaningful collaboration. DRIPA must be implemented, the policies currently utilized by the District of Summerland, which impacts Syilx lands and resources, must be amended in collaboration with PIB. Until these important actions are undertaken, and in lieu of meaningful engagement, PIB cannot support the issuance of building permits for developments at this time. I do appreciate your time this evening and the opportunity to speak. And PIB does know that Summerland Council will continue the dialogue and work necessary to ensure for the protection of PIB's social, cultural, environmental, and economic interests. Why Limlipt?
Thank you very much, James. Council, any questions you have of Mr. Pepper while he's here? All right. Thank you so much for hanging in there with us and your short presentation to Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Have a good evening.
You too. Marianne, you're still here. Did you want to speak any further? Okay, please come ahead.
First of all, I want to remind Council back in 2016, as far as the OCP goes, I remember directly, or distinctly, I should say, that Councillor Carlson said that the OCP is a moving document, and I would agree with that. So I think we can move forward with it, but I do think, since it hasn't been reviewed, that it should be reviewed, especially the lower town. It's very distinct from where it's up on the bench and down below. They're two different areas completely. Secondly, I don't know if it's a complaint, but I've had to speak to your bylaw officers quite well 3 times in the past year over the parks, designated park area that is adjacent to our property. It was the old parking lot for the, what used to be the old folks home, okay, across the street. And what we're getting is a lot of transients parking there overnight, and there's no washroom facilities and things like that. So I've spoken to both the RCMP and to your bylaw officer, and some of them have been moved on, but I see they're migrating back in there again. And because there's no facilities, it's a issue for us, you know, and people that are walking in that area. And I know it's not a high visibility area for the town of Summerland, but it certainly is a well-used area. And those trees that are growing there are now moving towards our property, but that's beside the point. But they're not a native tree. And my husband has been looking after that lot adjacent to us for the past 28 years. He's been mowing it and taking care of it because the city doesn't. They only come and do the little strip of grass that's in between. So if there's some way, such as putting signs up or removing some of the trees so that it's less enticing for people to be parking in that area, I would appreciate it. Even signage would help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. I see our Director of Development Services, who also oversees the bylaw officers and the work that they do, is writing your concern down. So thank you. Okay, we don't have anyone on the line, I don't think. Okay. So I'll call for adjournment. Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you.